Chapter 3. A Peculiar Child. For his first 9 years, Ferry remained hidden from the eyes of others, sheltered by the whispering sheets and the strong branches of the old walnut tree. It was his favorite place in the vastness of his small world. From there, he could gaze far and away, beyond the rooftops and into the distant horizon. Right there, on the outskirts, there stretched Shepherd's Forest. At times, when the sun dipped below the horizon, Ferry could feel a shift in the air around him. The rustle of leaves took on haunting echoes, and the chirping of night bugs seemed to change with each passing night. Owl hoots pierced through the crisp air, both menacing and enticing. And he was certain that strange, wonderful things were happening in the forest as night fell. Glowing sparks and orbs danced above the treetops, sometimes in mesmerizing patterns and other times in playful spirals. His keen ears caught whispers that were not from the creatures of the night, but something else entirely. And among them all, the most curious was the voice of a cheeky child, calling out his name every night. "Ferry, come play with me." One night, at the end of summer, Ferry sat perched atop his usual spot in the walnut tree. From there, he could hear a distant commotion. Shouts, the clanging of bells, and cheerful music filled the air. At first, he thought it was just people making their way home from the tavern. But as the sounds ebbed and flowed on the breeze, they seemed to draw nearer, then drift farther away, eventually fading into faint whispers that meandered over the hills. Ferry listened carefully. There was definitely singing. A child's voice, carried on by the gentle breeze of the night, weaving through the soft darkness. "Come along, O fairy boy, when the sun is gone to sleep. Come and sing, and feel the joy, where the forest is so deep." Ferry was not afraid. From the time he was a baby, he had grown accustomed to the voices, crackles, and sparkles that surrounded him. As the voice drew nearer, he listened intently, until it giggled right in his ear. "Are you coming, Ferry?" At that moment, Ferry felt the branch give way beneath his foot, and he fell. But before he could hit the ground, he felt invisible hands reach out to catch him. He quickly sprang to his feet, scanning the darkness around him. How peculiar! Despite the fall, he found himself without a scratch. His mother came running, alerted by his cry. "Ferry, how many times have I told you not to climb so high?" she scolded him. "Mum, what are the lights in the forest? Or the giggles I keep hearing?" he asked that night when she was putting him to sleep in his room, upstairs. Eileen furrowed her brow, as she usually did when faced with such questions. "There are many things in this world that remain beyond our understanding, my sweet child. Things that may play tricks on our eyes and ears. Things that are not always as they appear. And children with a big imagination, like yours, may see what others can't. Now it's time for you to sleep," she said, planting a gentle kiss on his forehead. Ferry drifted off to sleep, that cheeky little voice still echoing in his head. "Good night, Ferry." It was a peaceful Sunday afternoon. Ferry and his mother were watching a panel game show on TV, while Peter enjoyed his beer and newspaper. That day, however, Eileen found it difficult to concentrate as Ferry continually drew her attention. He lay on the carpet in front of the TV, his eyes fixed on the screen. Eileen listened closely. He was quietly whispering all the right answers to the questions on the show. "Did you see that?" Eileen asked her husband once the show ended, and Ferry left the room to fetch some crisps. "See what?" Peter replied, a touch of annoyance evident as he couldn't read his newspaper in peace. Ferry knew all the right answers, Eileen said, her excitement palpable. Peter fussed in his armchair. "Well, I'm sure it was only a coincidence. How could a child know all those things? Unless you've been reading to him from your encyclopedia," he teased, of course, about Eileen's prized possession, a gift from her estranged parents. But she didn't feel discouraged. "I think we should send him to school." I can't give him home lessons anymore. I've taught him everything I know. Peter scoffed, setting aside his newspaper. Send him to school? Can't you see the poor boy lives in his own world? He dreams with his eyes open, and he gets hurt at the slightest touch of a nail. What could he possibly do at school? He won't last a day, he said before storming off to his workshop, muttering all the way through. But Ferry overheard his parents talk. He longed for the chance to explore the world, and going to school seemed like his ticket to freedom. I really want to go to school, Mum, he said one day, as summer drew to a close. Eileen hesitated, her gaze drifting away. I don't know, Ferry. Maybe your father is right. You might get hurt among strangers. And you'll be older than the other first graders. But I could join the third grade like children my age. You've taught me well. I'm sure I can pass the exams, Ferry insisted. His mother shook her head, as concern etched on her face. It's not the exams I'm worried about, my dear. Children can be cruel sometimes. What if your father is right? What if they laugh at you or make fun of you? Why would they? Ferry wondered. I'll treat them nicely. Wouldn't they do the same? You said that if you treat people with kindness, only good things will happen to you. Days passed since their talk. But Eileen couldn't shake the thought of her son going to school. From that day on, she made it her mission to convince her husband that it was the best thing for Ferry. We won't spend any more money on school, she assured him. I'll work harder. I'll take care of all the school expenses. Yeah, I bet nothing good will come of this, Peter Donovan muttered, weary of his wife's persistence. So be it. Let him go to school then. But you won't see one penny from me, he shouted before storming out of the house, as was his habit after an argument. The following week, as autumn whispered its arrival through the changing colors of the leaves and the gentle warmth of the sun, Andrew Ferry Donovan enrolled in the third grade of the only school in Good Hots. Ferry had never felt more anxious. He was leaving home for the first time. He had eagerly awaited this moment. But now, standing at the threshold, doubt crept in. What if people were unkind to him? What if they laughed at him? Or avoided him? But when he looked into his mother's gentle clear blue eyes, all the worries disappeared. He trusted that nothing could go wrong with her by his side. But the boy did not know the world and people. Unbeknownst to him, he had become the talk of the town. As soon as they stepped outside, all eyes turned toward him, whispers trailing in their wake. His mother, however, gripped his hand tighter, and smiled at him as they continued on their way. Their first stop was Mr. Button's tailor shop. The tailor greeted Ferry's mother with a nod before studying Ferry with keen interest behind his spectacles. How old did you say you were, young lad? He inquired. 9, replied Ferry. You certainly look older than that, Mr. Button said as he measured Ferry's size with his sewing meter. You look more like a 13-year-old. But that's not a bad thing, you know. It means no one will ever dare to mess with you, he added with a wink. Leaving the tailor shop, Ferry and his mother made their way to the bookshop. Mrs. Donovan treated Ferry to a large, fruity ice cream from the van parked at the street corner and told him to wait for her on the bench outside the bookshop. Ferry couldn't contain his glee. The sun warmed his face, and the ice cream was delicious, a blend of fruits and cream as light as a cloud. With his eyes shut, he took a deep breath of the gentle autumn air. What's your name? A child's voice chimed nearby. Ferry flinched. A young boy about his age stood before him, holding a cone with melting ice cream in his hand. He wore shorts and a speckled blouse. He had scraped elbows and knees, and a peculiar haircut with a thick, brown fringe falling over his eyes. Small auburn freckles adorned his nose and sun-kissed cheeks. Ferry hesitated. He had never talked to another child before. He told him his name though. I'm Matt, the boy introduced himself, then plopped down beside Ferry on the bench without waiting for an invitation. Ice cream dripped from his hand, trickling down to his elbows, yet Matt didn't seem bothered. "You're Mrs. Donovan's son, aren't you?" Matt inquired. Ferry nodded, not sure of what to say. He had little experience with real children. And Matt seemed as real as can be. "I've heard so much about you," Matt continued. "You're pretty famous in this town. Did you know that? Dad says you have an unusual sickness which makes your skin so pale. And you can hang from the ceiling for hours like bats. And that you can climb the walls with your bare hands. Is that true?" Before Ferry could answer, Matt leaped to his feet and circled the bench, examining him closely. "Why do you wear gloves when it's not even wintertime? Why is your face so pale? And why is your hair so white? And your ears? They're so pointy." Ferry shrugged. "I don't know, it's just the way I look, I suppose." When Matt opened his mouth to ask another question, or more, a lean man appeared from around the corner. "Matty, come here," he said, his gaze on Ferry. "I thought I'd told you not to talk to strangers. But Dad, he's not a stranger. He's the Donovan boy. All the town knows about him." Matt's father studied Ferry from head to toe, yet said nothing. Matt sighed and took his father's hand. Then he turned and waved at Ferry. "Bye, Ferry, see you at school." "You are coming to school, aren't you?" he said before he walked away with his father. Ferry waved back at him until they disappeared at the corner of the street. His mother came out of the bookshop, happily chatting. "Let's go, sweetheart. I bought you a school bag, notebooks, a pen, and an inkpot. Oh, and let's not forget the crayons. I can now say you are ready for school." Ferry smiled back at her, and together they walked home under the warm gaze of the sun.